how bad is it to string 4 strings, one on one side, and then completely stringing on the opposite side? So it's kind of like the whole idea of putting pressure on the frame and trying to put the idea is to put equal pressure on both sides to some degree. I know that some people, when they're stringing, they will string 2 on one side, 2 mains on, and we're talking about the main strings here because those are the ones that are initially going to be the first ones that you're installing in the racket, and they're the ones that are going to be putting that initial pressure on the frame because they're going to be and so you want to try to even that balance so it doesn't, you know, potentially create problems. And so I know some stringers would like to do 2 on one side, then they move to the next side and do 2 and then move back to the other side. And I like that approach, 2 or 3 at a time, versus doing 2 on one side and then doing 4 on the other side. Because although it kind of almost seems like it's the same thing, it's not, because you put a little bit of pressure on one side. Now you're putting a lot of pressure on the other side, and now you're going back to doing a little bit of pressure on the other side. So I would prefer to keep it equal. So if you're going to do 3 on one side, do 3 on the other. Don't go to 6. Then go back and do the other 3, because it does make a difference, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, when you're doing the center of the racket, and I always just do 2, 2, 2, 2. I just go back and forth 2s. I've always done it that way. The center of the racket is probably less of a concern than when you get to the really rounded outer edges. So if you're doing 4 in the middle, it's probably not nearly as bad as doing 4 when you're at the final 4 mains, right? Where there's a lot of pressure building up. But I think it's just a better idea to keep it, like you said, just almost alternate, you know, every 2. They say you can sometimes start with 3 and then go over, but I just always do 2 and 2. Like I think, you know, Herb, who's been on your show, he mentions how the rackets are much stronger now than they used to be. You know, you used to use some of these aluminum string these aluminum rackets, and you'd kind of see them distort in front of you. So, but you know, some of the structure quality of the rackets now, they stand up a lot better.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I totally know what you're talking about. If you remember the old Prince Pro aluminum rackets, right?
Yeah,
It's like if somebody strung that thing wrong, and like you'd see it and it'd be like turning into this really weird shape. Or like, I think I strung this wrong and it looks like a pear or something, you know, some bizarre shape.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny. You could do that with rackets. Or if somebody, like, you know, if you've ever, you know, somebody who's really new at stringing might think that they could just remove the racket off the machine after they've only put the main strings on it or something like that, right? And you know what happens when you do that. I mean, the racket just totally can bust apart, or at least distort. Or if you have a stringing machine that only has 2-point mounting, and you didn't secure the main part of the support,
Right.
because sometimes you have to adjust 1 or 2 of the supports, and then you tighten it, right? So if you didn't do that, and so it's loose to go, I mean, you can't tell by it just sitting there, but once you start pulling strings and it goes in, and then the racket just kind of starts to like form, and then, you know, you start having a round racket, right, instead of an oval racket. So any of those kind of things could happen. So the whole idea here is just to keep the weight and the pressure equal on both sides. And one way to do that is just to alternate. And if you get in a good habit of doing that, whether it's 2, 3, whatever, I think that's a good amount, because then you can go back and forth. I mean, I know sometimes when I got to the end strings, sometimes I would wait on the last one because of the added weight that I put on it for a knot. And if my machine or whatever didn't have that, if my machine didn't have an extra tie-off button or whatever, where it adds extra poundage, where I had to do it manually, I would wait to do those on the end, because then I can do them both at the same time. Because I wouldn't have to adjust my machine back to the other tension and then go back to it. So sometimes you do it for the ease of stringing, you know, based on what equipment you're stringing on. But But aside from that, just alternate. So how bad is it to string 4 strings on one side and then completely string opposite side? Well, I would think that there's better ways of doing it, and I probably wouldn't do it. It's probably not going to, you know, mess the racket up per se, but you know, I would probably do it in
Yeah.
shorter segments, you know.
There's no benefit really to do it, and you're only going to possibly get people to question your craftsmanship if you do it that way. If I saw someone stringing my racket pulling 4 on one side, you know, I would probably wonder if they're really the right person to be stringing my rackets.
Right. And definitely don't do all on one side and then go to the other side. That's
Right.
never do that. So
Yeah, no.